the daughter of the powerful chieftain of the Quraysh Abu Sufiyan. Her frail body, nor father's influence could stop her from accepting Islam. She joined the mothers of the believers and given the glad tidings of paradise. Her name is Habibah Bint Abi Sufyan. Join us for this amazing new chapter in the hit series, Heroines of Islam, with your host Laila Nasheeba, Mondays and Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Right here on Sunnahfollowers.
We are here now and getting ready to start our series entitled The Heroines of Islam. The Heroines of Islam, and I apologize for being late. You guys know I had to do the PowerPoint because I ended the other class so late. So, but we're going to get started. In fact, let me just set this up right so we can get started. Let me set it up. And please, guys, don't forget to support this dawah effort. You know, we are a nonprofit organization, and all your donations go to help pay for our living living expenses of this website. Let me put her name here. This is the story of Habiba. Let me write her name correctly. Bint Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufiyan. Okay, so inshallah, everybody should be able to see the, let me put it again. There you go. Can you see it? There you go. So let's get started. This is for the recording. Whew, sorry, so sleepy. In alhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam Allah, wa rasulallah. Welcome to our series entitled The Heroines of Islam. The Heroines of Islam. And this is the series whereas we are discussing the female companions of the Prophet, sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam, because it's very important, especially with the what we're experiencing as Muslims around the world with the fitna that's going on, that we reaffirm our identity as Muslims. We need to leave and set aside those non-Muslim identities that we've been living by and living up under for these so many years. And instead, we need to turn back to the Sunnah, turn back to the correct Islamic identity, the correct Muslim identity. And the best way to develop that identity as a Muslim woman is by learning about these female companions. Because by learning about them, you learn about yourself. You learn about how you should be as a Muslim woman. You learn, for example, that Islam did not oppress us, that Islam did not bring women down. You learn that Islam liberated women. There's no need for feminism because Islam gave women rights that they never had before. Islam made us equal to men spiritually. We have different duties, different obligations, but we're together, united spiritually. So there's no need for women to be on standing out, preaching and calling for feminism. I don't understand these type of women because we have the rights. We have rights already. And when you learn about these wives of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who are the mothers of the believers, you see what your rights are. And today we're going to begin the story and the journey of one of the wives of the Prophet who came after Safiya, and that was Habiba, radiallahu anha. A lot to learn from her story. Her story is a story of patience. Her story and her relationship with the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, shows us how if we remain patient and accepting of the qadr of Allah, Allah will change our situation to that which is better, especially during the times that we're experiencing now with all this war against Islam. War has been declared against the Muslims, okay? So we have to learn how to deal with our trials with patience, trusting in Allah, never leaving our belief system, never violating the laws of Allah, because as long as we stay within the guidelines of Allah, as long as we don't transgress his limits, our weapon is our supplication. That's the weapon that no non-believer has. We have supplication, but in order for your supplication to work, you cannot be deliberately, intentionally disobeying Allah. And you have to be a person that has the characteristics that Allah commands us to develop, such as patience. Okay? So let's begin this journey in learning about Habiba. Let's put the PowerPoint up on the screen. You're going to like her story. Her story is not a short one. We're going to talk about her for this week and next week because there's a lot of lessons to be learned from her. Oh, I put 2. This is part 1, guys. Remind me to change that. This is the story of Habiba, part 1. I was talking when I was making the PowerPoint, so I don't know. I must have said 2 or something and put that. So, Habiba, radiallahu anha. The Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam married her, and she was born 17 years before the beginning of the Prophet's call to Islam. She came from the Umayyah branch of the Quraysh, and her father was the chief of the Quraysh. Her father was Abu Sufiyan. Abu Sufiyan, and we're going to do his story again one day. I've done it so many times. Abu Sufiyan, who is slandered. You hear Muslims today cursing him. They don't know that Abu Sufiyan converted to Islam. You hear them cursing his wife Hind. They don't know that Hind converted to Islam either. So you're cursing 2 eminent companions. And that's another discussion for another class and another story. Okay. But Habiba, Habiba was his daughter. She was the daughter of Abu Sufiyan. And her mother was the daughter of Abil As bin Umayyah. You guys see her mother in those movies? Hind. How many of you have cursed Hind? Hind was the one who ate the liver of Hamza. Okay? You hear people cursing these eminent companions. Well, Habiba was their daughter. And she, like all the other wives, if you guys can notice, can see, all the wives of the Prophet were related to him as cousins, except for Safiya. Although Safiya was a cousin too, but she was a cousin from a different mother. She was Jewish. She was related to the Prophet Muhammad through the Prophet Ismail. So Safiya was a cousin of the Prophet too, but she was not Arabic. She was Jewish. All the other wives of the Prophet were Arabic, and they were related to him as cousins through their tribal relations. They were all from different branches of the Quraysh, whereas Safiya was related to him through prophethood. She was the daughter of Prophet Aaron. She was the niece of Moses, alaihi salam. Okay? So to be honest, the Prophet was related to every one of his wives, including Safiya. But Safiya through prophethood, whereas the rest through tribal blood. Okay? Habiba's real name was Ramla. That was her real name, Ramla. But she got the nickname Habiba because her firstborn child was a daughter. And remember, the Arabs still do. They name themselves with a kunya or a nickname after their firstborn. Her firstborn was a daughter who she named Habiba. So that's how she got the kunya Habiba, but her real name was Ramla. And Habiba was married to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's cousin Ubaidullah ibn Josh. Y'all know who that is. Listen to the name. Ibn Josh. Ubaidullah ibn Josh. Can anybody tell me who else has such a name? Ubaidullah ibn Josh. Who else shares that name? Can anybody think? This is the name of Zainab. Zainab is Zainab, the daughter of Josh. So you can see how they were all related. Zainab, radiallahu anha, was the Prophet's first cousin. Ubaidullah was Zainab's brother. And he too was the Prophet Muhammad's first cousin. Habibah, the daughter of Abu Sufiyan, she was a distant cousin, like a third cousin, a second cousin rather. And she married Ubaidullah, Zainab's brother. Y'all see that? Do the names, Josh. All right. So before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the call to prophethood, there were a few of the Quraysh who did follow the religion of Hanif before Islam. Remember when I did the story of Khadija radiallahu anha, her cousin Waraka. Waraka was one of the scholars of the Hanif. They didn't worship idols. They weren't Jews, they were Arabs, but they still followed the religion of Ismail. They still followed the religion of Abraham. Remember, the Arabs did not disbelieve in Allah. They believed in Allah, but they did not believe that Allah was the only one worthy of worship. Well, there were 4 Hanif leaders. Khadija's cousin Waraka was one. They still believed and worshiped Allah alone. Okay, well, Habiba was not a pagan like her father and her mother, whereas Abu Sufiyan and his wives, they worshipped those other idols. Habiba never did. Okay, she never worshipped any idols, just like the other wives of the prophet. None of the prophet's wives ever worshipped idols. Do y'all see that? None of the wives of the prophet ever worshipped idols. Just like Khadija. Khadija was Hanif. She did not worship idols either. She always worshiped Allah, believed in him, and worshiped him alone. She took her guidance from her cousin Waraka, who was one of the Hanif leaders. Okay. Abu Bakr was upon the Hanif belief system. So his daughter Aisha was raised on that too. Sauda never worshipped idols. She adhered to the Hanif belief system. This is the way of Abraham. The way of Abraham. Now do y'all see why in the places like United Arab Emirates, they call themselves Hanif. They call themselves Arabs following the way of Abraham. Okay, but this is wrong. Prophet Abraham was replaced with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're supposed to follow his sunnah, not Abraham's sunnah, not Moses' sunnah. Like the Prophet Muhammad said, if Moses were here today, he'd have no choice but to follow my sunnah. When Jesus comes back, Jesus will not come back as a prophet. He will come back as a leader following my sunnah. But so anyway, none of the prophet's wives were pagans. Salama, she belonged to the Hanif belief system too. Okay? All of the prophets' wives belonged to the Hanif belief system except for Sophia. Sophia was a Jew. She still followed the teachings of the Torah. Her grandfather, Aaron, and her uncle, Moses. Okay, so that's a little bit of history there. So, when the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam, declared himself a prophet, Habibah's husband, Ubaidullah, he was one of the first to convert to Islam. And so did Habibah. So did Salama and her husband. Remember, Salama's husband was Hanif too? So was Abu Bakr. All of them were the first to convert to Islam because they were Hanif anyway. They believed in the Hanif religion anyway. So, Habibah, her father was Abu Sufiyan. And you all know that Abu Sufiyan was one of the rulers and leaders amongst the Quraysh. And like the rest of his wives, Habibah was not a poor woman. She didn't come from a poor lifestyle. Just like Zainab didn't, Aisha didn't, Hafsa, none of them did. Ubaidullah, who was the brother of Zainab and his wife Habibah, they were among the first people to convert to Islam and to accept the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a messenger of the world. And this angered her father, Abu Sufiyan, who was one of the heads of the Meccan state. And even though she was his daughter, her and her husband still were subjected to a lot of abuse and persecution because of their belief system, because they were rejecting the belief system of Abu Sufiyan and them, even though they never believed in it. Okay? So, needless to say, when Allah sent down a command telling the Muslims to migrate to Abyssinia to escape the persecution of the Quraysh, needless to say, Habibah and her husband, Ubaidullah, they joined the second group that left Mecca for Abyssinia so they could practice their religion freely. So they were amongst the second group of Muslims who migrated from Mecca to Abyssinia. And remember, the king of Abyssinia was a Christian man. He welcomed these migrants. And even though the Quraysh tried to bring the people back, and y'all can see why Abu Sufiyan was so intense on bringing them people back, because his daughter was amongst them. And even though the Abu Sufiyan and all the other Qurayshi leaders sent all these expensive gifts to try to buy the favor of the Ethiopian king to send those Meccans back, he didn't send them back. So they were allowed to stay there in Abyssinia and practice their religion without being persecuted. But again, a lot of them were unhappy, Habibah included, because they weren't from Ethiopia. Ethiopia was a different land. They all missed their home. They were Meccan. They were from the desert of Mecca. They missed their people, their family. They missed their friends. So the people, even though they were allowed to be free in their belief system, they were very unhappy. So what the Muslims did, all the Muslims that left and migrated to Abyssinia, they all settled there together. And they formed their own community there. And they helped each other. They supported each other. They worked on wala wal bara. Wala wal bara, which is what the Prophet commands us That's part of the Shahada. They worked on their allegiance to Allah, their allegiance to the Prophet, and their allegiance to each other. But Habibah's husband, Ubaidullah, he had a problem. Even though he was Muslim and he never was a worshiper of idols, he had one weakness, and his weakness was alcohol. He used to get drunk a lot. Okay? So he went to Abyssinia. He used to drink a lot because he never was happy there either. They missed their homeland. And also, he became curious about the Christian religion, and he ended up apostating from Islam. Habiba tells us, and these hadiths are in Bukhari, Muslim, and Muwatta. She says that one day he came home and just told her, I have converted to Christianity. And he was drunk. He said, I'm a Muslim. I'm not a Muslim anymore. I'm now a Christian. And he told her that he wanted her to convert too. In fact, he tried to pressure her into denouncing Islam and converting too. But Habiba said, no, I could never leave this faith. I truly believe in Allah. I truly believe that the Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. So Ubaidullah was very unhappy that his wife would not convert. So what did he do? He went to the other immigrants and tried to get them to convert to Islam, to Christianity too. So he carried out this apostasy campaign to try to convince the migrants that they should leave the religion of Islam and adapt this Christianity religion. But very few of them listened. One day they say he got drunk and he was killed. You'll find that hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. How he got killed, we don't know. There's a couple of different opinions, but they say he got into an argument, with some other Muslims about Christianity versus Islam. He was drunk. He said some things he shouldn't say, and they killed him. The bottom line, Habiba was free of him because she was shocked at her husband, number one, because he had been a devout Muslim. He was like Abu Sufiyan. Like Abu Salama. He was like Salama's husband, one of the originals. So she was in a state of shock that her husband would denounce Islam for this Christian way. And she didn't know what she would do. But Allah took care of it for her. Because, in Islam, we cannot be married to a kafir man. A Muslim woman cannot be married to a non-Muslim man, not even for a second. So after he couldn't convince her, he left, went out, got drunk, and she got the word he was dead. So you see, Allah took care of that. Allah didn't put her through that, being with no kafir man. All right? When she got the news of his death, she was so ashamed of him, ashamed of how he came to this new country and carried on drinking and all of that. Remember, he was not only her husband, but he was the father of her daughter. She had a daughter named Habibah. So it was embarrassing. Everybody talked about how he apostated, how he got drunk and somebody killed him. They don't know who it was. But being ashamed and embarrassed, Habiba distanced herself. She isolated herself from the other people. She didn't want people whispering about her, talking about her, gossiping about her. And so she stayed to herself with just her daughter. And all this did was make her homesick even more. She couldn't live in peace in Ethiopia because of the shame her husband had brought on her. And she could not return to Mecca because her father was the leader over the Meccans. That was Abu Sufiyan. And Abu Sufiyan had began a war. He had declared war against the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She felt alone. This was a woman that was ashamed. This was a woman that was alone. She had a daughter to take care of. And whatever money her husband came with was running out. She couldn't live off the little bit of money that they brought from Mecca for long. And no man would marry her. She knew that because her father was Abu Sufiyan, the leader and the enemy against the Muslims. No Muslim man in his right mind would marry her because they would fear the repercussions of her father against their family at home. So she didn't know what to do. She felt helpless and hopeless. She had a child. She had just a little bit of money that was left because this man drank up the money and did whatever he did. So what did she do? She turned to Allah and started praying to him, talking to Allah. And this is what I tell you, sisters, we're all going to go through hardships. Do you sit around complaining, or do you do like Habiba? She isolated herself. She distanced herself, el-bara. She distanced herself from the people so she can work on herself. And sometimes as a Muslim, we have to do that. We need to get away. We need that break away from all the drama. A lot of Muslim men, they need that alone time so they can rethink and recharge. We women, we need a break away from it, away from the website, away from the kids, just to think about what I'm going to do. So we talk to Allah. We take it to Allah. We don't sit around saying, pray for me, make dua for me. Habiba wasn't asking nobody to make dua for her. She made dua for herself. And in the meantime, the news had traveled. The news had traveled back to Mecca about what happened to her. Quiet as it's kept, guys, Abu Sufiyan wanted his daughter back. He loved his daughter, but he wasn't going to take her back until she denounced that religion. Okay? The Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the companions, they heard about what happened. Ubaidullah was like Abu Salama. Okay? He was one of the originals. It was a shock. What did the Prophet Muhammad do? He heard about the struggles. He heard about how homesick and desolate those Muslims were in Abyssinia. Even though the king allowed them to live there freely, this was a strange land. They couldn't work it like they did Mecca. They were merchants. They didn't have nothing to sell, nothing to bring. They had to leave their businesses and all that behind. The Prophet didn't protest. This is what I'm getting to. He had his people, half of his people were in a foreign land, living amongst people of a different faith, a different belief system. Some of his right-hand men had apostated because just like we try to give dawah to the kafir are giving dawah to us too. He had women like Sauda. He married Sauda because Sauda went through the same thing. Remember, when she went there, her husband did the same thing. Her husband apostated too. That's how the Prophet married Sauda. So a lot of his people, the women, were left alone in this strange country because their husbands were drinking and apostating because they couldn't deal with the fact that they couldn't live the lives they were living in Mecca. Did the Prophet protest? No. It would be unfair. How would I look like going to the Kaaba, standing up on that box, protesting about Abyssinia when we're being persecuted here. And not to mention, I got Muslims in other places being persecuted. The prophet told the companions, pray, make dua, make dua, make dua. Dua is the weapon of mass construction. Pray, pray to Allah, pray to Allah, pray to Allah, and stand together as one. Stand together as one. Allah will work it out. So back to Habiba. She was alone in this strange place with this daughter. Didn't know what to do. So one day, after crying herself to sleep, she had a dream. And in this dream, someone called her name and they said, "Oh, Habiba, mother of the believers." She jumped up, shocked, looking around. What was that? And then she thought, mother of the believers? She took that dream as an inspiration that help was on the way. From that dream, she deducted, well, maybe the Prophet Muhammad is going to marry me, because she had just cried herself to sleep, knowing that she didn't know what to do. She couldn't go home. None of the men would marry her because they feared her father. A woman can't live without a man. Back in those days, a woman had to have a husband. She cried herself to sleep after praying. And Allah, someone said, Habiba, oh mother of the believer. She jumped up. What? And this made her happy. Remember, guys, all of us as Muslims, soon as you convert to this religion or you start practicing it correctly, Allah tells us he's going to send tests to us. He's going to test us and test us with everything we hold sacred, just to see if we're going to break or if we're going to stay firm in our faith. Habiba was tested. Like so many other women, like Sauda and so many other women that had to migrate when their husbands apostated. Okay? She didn't denounce her deen. She didn't apostate too. And she didn't have to worry about staying with him, because she told him, I'd rather go out and eat grass than be married to a kafir. And when she told him that, that's when he went out, got drunk, and got killed. She was ready to take her daughter and go live in the woods and eat grass than be with a kafir. When we show Allah, that I'm here, Allah, I'm going to handle it, because I know you're not going to put nothing on me that I can't handle. And we turn to him, not running to the internet, pray for me, make dua for me, make dua for me. We make dua for ourselves and talk to Allah, hold conversations with him like she did. Like the believer, beautiful dreams. Beautiful dreams. Your good dreams come from Allah. Beautiful dreams. Allah doesn't send inspirations to anyone but a prophet. But Allah can send you a dream telling you, like he did to Habiba, be patient. Someone's going to marry you. It'll probably be the prophet. So she woke up from that dream with a burst of energy. And listen to what she tells us in her own words. She said, while in Abyssinia, nothing delighted me as much as the news that a concubine named Abraham brought to me from the king. Abraham used to take care of the king's clothing and perfumes. After having that dream, she came to me and said she wanted to talk to me. She said, "Oh, Habiba, the prophet of Allah has written a letter to the king of Abyssinia saying that he wants to marry you." So there was the dream. Habiba's telling us, oh my God, she had just had that dream. And here comes a servant of the king letting her know that the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wants to marry her. So she says that she told the servant, may Allah give you good blessings too. But repeat it to me. Did you really hear this from the king? She said she was so shocked because she had just had that beautiful dream a few nights before. That she made the servant girl tell her what the king said several times because she couldn't believe it. Allah had answered her dua. Allah had answered her dua in a matter of days. Subhanallah. So, and by the way, these hadiths are in Bukhari, Muslim, and Muwatta. Bukhari, Muslim, and Muwatta. Habiba goes on to say that the servant told her, the king has asked you to appoint a guardian to represent you for the marriage. Habiba said her cousin, Khalid bin Sa'id bin As, was there. He was her cousin. So she said she told Abraham, go back to the king and tell him that my cousin Khalid is here and I want him to be my wali. And she was so happy that she took off her bangles. She took off her necklaces and her earrings and gave them to Abraham. Again, the Arab women love their jewelry. Another one of the wives did that too. This is when they got happy, they would just take off their jewelry and give it to you. Okay? So here you can see a woman has to have a guardian. The king let her know. There's a hadith that says the king said, I will be your guardian, because at this time, guys, for those of you who don't know, and this is a different story, King Negus converted to Islam. King Negus was Muslim at this time. He was a Muslim. He had adapted the religion of Islam. And in the Bukhari, we have an authentic hadith that says when the servant girl came to her, the servant girl told her, either the king can represent you as your guardian, or you can choose someone else. And that's when Habiba said, I choose my cousin Khalid because he's here. He's here in Abyssinia. He knows me. I'd rather have my cousin represent me. Okay, so King Negus was Muslim. He had converted to Islam. And that's a different story. We'll talk about that in another class. Okay, so this is how the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Habiba became married. They were married through a letter. The letter that the Prophet Muhammad wrote to the king requesting the hand of Habiba. Her cousin represented and accepted it, and that's how they were married. And that's the dalil, that you don't have to be in person. I don't have to be with him to marry him. I tell you guys, marriage is easy in Islam. We can get married over the telephone. We can get married through a letter. We don't have to be together to do a marriage. A marriage is a simple contract. Whereas the man asks if you will accept him and your guardian says yes, and you present the dowry, that's it. And his witness, that's it. The prophet's seal, his stamp was his witness that it was him. Okay? And the king was a witness, and so was her cousin Khalid. They were married through that letter and wasn't even together in the same country. Okay? A lot of comes out of this story. So Jafir, y'all remember him? Jafar ibn Abu Talib. He was the uncle of the prophet, and he was also the uncle of Umm Habiba. They were all related. When she had agreed to the marriage, Jafir called all the Muslims to gather together. And after giving a speech, the king gave Habiba her dowry of 400 dirhams. And he gave her a necklace. Now remember, every wife that the prophet married, he gave them a dowry of 400 dirham. But why did she get more? That was a gift from the king. King Negus gave her the necklace as a gift. Okay? And also, another reason why she was given more is because even though they were married, she was in a different country. The prophet still had to take care of her and her daughter. She had a daughter. So the prophet had the king give her a little more as a gift, so that way she could live. She could buy food. She could buy clothing. And she'd have a roof over her head for her and her daughter. And just to let you guys know, we're going to talk about this on Wednesday. The prophet sent money to her every month. The prophet took care of Habiba every month, her and her children. He sent money to her every month, even though they were not together, because he's in Saudi Arabia, she's in Ethiopia. A man is supposed to provide for his wife, guys. It's your job to pay her food, buy her food, clothing, and her housing. The prophet did that for her every month. She didn't have to worry about where was her food going to come from. She didn't have to worry about eating grass like she thought she was going to have to do. Okay? So after their verbal part of the contract, that's when the king told the companions, he said, it is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad to have a meal after a marriage. And so the king Negus paid for them a big wedding feast. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So King Negus not only gave her jewelry as a gift, but also paid for the wedding feast, the walima. And the next morning, the king's slave, Abraham, came to Habiba's door, and she brought gifts to her, more gifts that the king's harem had sent to her. Now remember, polygamy was the way of the world. Everybody had more than one wife. King Negus had a bunch of wives too. The Christians did polygamy, so did the Jews, everybody. So the king's wives, his wives sent a bunch of gifts to Habiba too. So imagine how happy she was. She went from not knowing how she was going to live, how she was going to survive. She was prepared to be kicked out of the home she was in and go out into the desert with her child and eat grass. And here she got a husband, she got a roof over her head, she got food and more money coming in. The king just sending money, money, money to her that'll be able to take care of her and her daughter for a while. They'll be able to live comfortably for a while. When Habiba received the gifts, she was so happy that she took 50 dinar from her mahar and gave it to the slave girl Abraham. She said, Abraham, yesterday I didn't have no money at all. I was only able to give you 2 bracelets. But today Allah has blessed me with this. And she gave her that 50 dinar. But Abraham refused to accept the money. And not only did she refuse to accept the money, but she also gave her back her bracelets. She said, Oh, Habiba, our king has commanded us to not accept any gifts from you and to give you back what you have given us. And he in turn gifted us. So she said, take your gifts back. The king has rewarded us. He gave me more gifts than you could ever give. So subhanallah, this is how great a man King Negus was. He was happy because he was Muslim. Okay. And so Habiba stayed in that beautiful home. She had food, she had clothing, she had money. She was able to take care of her daughter. And Abraham and her became good friends. Abraham too converted to Islam. And she used to visit Habiba. And every time she would come to see Habiba, she would say, oh, Habiba, whenever you are reunited with your husband, the prophet, please tell him that I send salams to him. And just to let you guys know, we're going to talk about it. It was a while. It was quite some time before Habiba was able to be with her husband, because the prophet was in battle. He was fighting the battle of Badr against Abu Sufiyan. He was fighting the battle of Uhud, the battle of the ditch. So it was like over a year or so before Habiba was able to join the prophet. But he sent money to her every month during that time. And she had a good friend in Abraham. And Abraham was Muslim and kept telling her, whenever you go home, give him my salams. Give him my salams. And when Habiba did go home, she was able to go home right before the conquest of Mecca. That's how long it was. When she did get to be with her husband finally, she told him, oh prophet, the slave girl Abraham, she sends her peace and blessings to you. And the prophet was so happy to hear that. Okay. So when did he marry Habiba? This marriage took place in the 7th year of the migration. And this was Allah's way of rewarding Habiba, rewarding her for her patience and her devotion to Islam. Also, by marrying her, this marriage acted as a means of weakening the hostility and hatred towards the Prophet Muhammad by her father, Abu Sufiyan. Because Habiba expected her father to be angry after hearing she had married the prophet without his permission. But it ended up not being that way. And that's where we're going to stop today. Because as you all know, Abu Sufiyan ended up becoming Muslim. When he heard about his daughter marrying the prophet, that did something to his heart, because he loved Habiba. She was his favorite daughter. And his reaction was the same as Khalid bin Walid. Remember, the prophet had married Habiba, Salama a couple of years before. Khalid bin Walid converted to Islam. Salama was Khalid bin Walid's first cousin. She was like his sister. He's the one that trained her how to work the sword. And like Khalid bin Walid said, if Salama finds happiness with Muhammad, then he must be all that he said he is. Well, this ended up being a reaction of her father, Abu Sufiyan, when he found out that his daughter had married the prophet. He said, my daughter's a strong-willed woman. Remember, these are strong women. Salama, Hafsa, Aisha, Habiba, Zainab. These were strong women like Laila Nasheeba. I keep telling y'all, the Arab women were not pushovers. The Arab women were warriors, just like I am. They believed in throwing down. They believed in throwing down. They weren't the women that would lick no pus. That hadith does not mean that Arab women were licking pus. They were probably punching you in the chin if you ask them to lick your pus. So for these strong women who no man could break, if these strong women saw something about him to make them marry him, he must be all that in a bag of chips. And that's where we're going to stop today. We're going to talk about what happened. Habiba was expecting anger from her father. She was expecting retaliation from her father. She was expecting her father to get even more violent in his quest against the Muslims. But it ended up being different. So I'm going to stop right here. Wednesday we'll continue with part 2. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika.